I'd like to. Okay. I just want to welcome everyone to an online discussion with Kristin Gray to talk about her book, The Amelia Six, which is a 2021 Kansas Notable Book Award book. Yay, and you have the seal on there too. Yay.
Cool. Thank you.
So with us, we have Kristin. We also have Elizabeth Lane, who lives in Atchison and knows a ton about the city and the area and the events. And we also have State Librarian Eric Norris. We also have Holly Hutchinson, who is the one making this whole thing work. And I'm Cindy Roop. I'm the coordinator of the Kansas Notable Book Program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Cindy. And I don't want to take up too much time, but one of the reasons for this event is Amelia Six was selected this year as one of our Kansas Notable Books. Every year, a selection committee gets together and we comb through the submissions that are sent to us throughout the entire state of Kansas. And the books that are submitted to us are either written by Kansans or about a Kansas related topic. Sometimes we get over 100, 150 submissions for different titles of books printed the year before. And then the selection committee narrows that down. And at the end of the day, I get to make a selection of 15 outstanding books to select that year and highlight as the most notable books by Kansans or about Kansas. And this year, very happy Amelia Six made the list. And normally what we would do for in part of the recognition for it is each year at the Kansas Book Festival, we hold a ceremony and we award the authors on the Senate floor. And this year it has changed over to the Washburn campus here in Topeka. The Kansas Book Festival will be held September 18th. It begins at 9 a.m. If you go to kansasbookfestival.com, you can find an itinerary of all the authors who are going to be there. You can find the times that different events like the Kansas Book Award Ceremony goes on. And it's a really fun event, so I'm just going to take the time to plug that. But another reason for this is unfortunately Kristin is not going to be there. So I was going to jump in at the very beginning of this and award and give Kristin her award. So with that, we will do this online then. Here you go, Kristin. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's perfect. And I got it. Yay. Thank you guys. It's beautiful.
Perfect, perfect. It's great to have you as part of that alumni. And with that, I will step out of the way and we'll begin the program.
Okay, well, thank you. That was perfect. Our first virtual presentation. So I just have a couple of questions for Kristin and Elizabeth, but the first one is for Kristin. And I just wondered if you could tell us what the Amelia Six is about.
Sure. The Amelia Six, which is published by Paula Wiseman Books, an imprint of Simon & Schuster, is about 6 girls who win a contest for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to spend the night in Atchison, Kansas at the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum. They all have different science, math, engineering-minded backgrounds. And Amelia Earhart was a big proponent of women in STEM and STEAM and engineering. And so these 6 girls are selected to spend the night and go on a fun night of scavenger hunts and fancy food. And the winners of the contest get to spend the night in her actual bedroom. So, and while they're there, a historic artifact goes missing, which of course is Amelia's flight goggles. So it's up to the girls to find who stole the goggles.
Okay. Well, do you find that kids today know who Amelia Earhart is?
The middle school crowd definitely knows that she's a pilot or a famous female explorer, adventurer. I find that the younger elementary students recognize, of course, the goggles, leather flight cap, her famous red airplane, the Vega, which is, you can go visit and see at the Smithsonian in DC. Not the plane, obviously, that she vanished in, but yes, they're familiar with her image, if maybe the younger kids don't know who she is. But definitely the solid grade school kids have studied her.
Okay. Well, Elizabeth, could you tell us how important Atchison, Kansas was in Amelia's life?
Atchison was extremely, extremely important in Amelia's early years. She was actually born at the Birthplace Museum, hence the name. And she lived in that house with her grandparents, Alfred and Amelia Otis. Her grandfather was a judge here in Atchison. Amelia and her sister Muriel, who was 2 years younger than her, spent much of their school years here in Atchison with those grandparents. Amelia's dad was an attorney for Rock Island Railroad. And he and his wife, Amelia's mother, lived in Kansas City most of the time, but he traveled extensively and she went with him. Therefore, the girls stayed here to have a really stable environment. Amelia found the house sits high up on the bluffs of the Missouri River. And so Amelia and her sister, being very adventuresome, even in their early years, would go out and collect insects and bugs. And this was much, much to her grandmother's dismay. Her grandmother thought they should be proper young ladies, because you have to think about what time this is. This is the early, turn of the 1900th century. So she did do things with many, many of the other affluent young ladies in town. And she also attended a school here in Atchison that was private, that was considered a college preparatory school at that time. But at the time she turned 12 and her sister Muriel 10, they went ahead and moved with their parents to Iowa. But Atchison was definitely that foundation for her.
Okay, well, this question is for both Kristin and Elizabeth. Why do you think that Amelia Earhart continues to be someone that people are fascinated with?
I think the public just loves mysteries, especially unsolved mysteries. And she was definitely in her time in the 1930s, America's sweetheart. And for her to go missing and still be missing, I think is huge and holds interest,
I think she was a really, really positive role model for young women today and in the past, and young men alike. But, if we're talking about young women, and there was a strong sense of adventure that she had, and her desire to push boundaries, especially sexual boundaries, where boys were supposed to do certain things and girls were supposed to do certain things. She went way beyond that. She and Muriel played football, and they just were rugged young ladies. And so I think that's why it was like a testament to looking outside the box. That's who she was.
Yeah, her fearlessness and grit and determination, were unparalleled. Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into the book and talk about the book. Kristin, there were 6 characters or main characters. And so maybe you could tell us something about about these girls.
The 6 girls, they were, and someone had asked me before our chat started if it was difficult to juggle the 6 girls, and it definitely was. But once they each had their own interest, it was a little easier to nail. Like one is into botany, and the main character, Millie, is a Rubik's speed cuber, which is based on, I had a son in middle school that started a Rubik's speed cubing club at his middle school, and we would travel for him to compete regionally, and he went to nationals once. So that's very much, I would go to these competitions and there'd be 200 to 300 middle school boys in the room, and I would look off to the side and there'd be 2 or 3 girls by themselves waiting for their event to compete. And they really stood out to me. And I thought, I want to write a story, about them. What would that look like? And about the same time, our family took a road trip up from Arkansas up to Atchison, and we toured the house. And that's where kind of all the pieces kind of fell to place. And I thought to combine the two. So, but once I worked out each girl, and of course they're sisters, so they kind of went together. It was easier to distinguish them. Dialogue was tricky. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and sometimes those teenage girls, they all start to mimic each other and kind of talk alike. So that was a little tricky too, is trying to distinguish. I worked hard to distinguish their voices. I probably could have done a little more, but at some point you just have to turn the book in and be done with it.
Well, I was going to ask you how you kept so many characters, because you have a large supporting cast too, but I don't want to do any spoilers.
And that's a good point, like physically in the actual house. So I made 2 separate research trips to tour the house. First was back in, I think it was Christmas of 2015, and Louise was the caretaker. And then I think Jan maybe was the one that was there the second time. But I actually came back, got some graph paper, like that you use for math class, and sketched out a floor plan of both levels as best that I could remember. So as I worked through my draft, I could physically place where everyone was in the house at each time, so I could make the mystery, work out. But it was fun. I love deep diving, and I can get lost sometimes in the trees and not see the whole forest, but I love that part. And when I had Skype with kids, I do show them a stack of drafts and a little graph sheet where I drew the floor plan, just because I think it's important for students to see, how a book's made.
Oh, that's really cool. I did find myself, as I read the book, returning again and again to the cover, because it did help me identify who the different girls are. And I could, so many times you have book covers where it doesn't really reflect the book. But this cover really did it. It almost looks like a map of the house. So it's got the girls going around, but you can identify, their pets, the mouse. So maybe you could tell us how you got so lucky with such a great cover.
I hit the jackpot with that cover, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was completely the art department. Lizzie, as the art director or the artist that was responsible for the publishing side, and she chose the artist. The illustrator's name is Celia Crampine, and she's Canadian. And honest to goodness, one day I just opened my email and the final cover was there. But they worked so hard. You're right, each girl matches their description in the book down to the hair and the moon boots, and you're right, the striped leggings and the rat. So I was blown away. It's if I could have chosen any cover as a child, my childhood dreams is, it's this is beautiful. So, but I can't take any credit for it. It was all the art department.
Well, why did you choose to frame this story as a mystery?
Mostly because I I love mysteries. I love closed room mysteries. They're my favorite thing. They always have been. I gobbled all the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boy books up as I could when I was a child. But I think it works in this setting and the context because Amelia Earhart is still one of our biggest mysteries or question marks. You know, we don't know what happened to her or her plane. And I thought that would be really interesting to explore as a story. And also these goggles that I meant, she of course had several pair of goggles, but the particular ones that I wrote about did go missing in her lifetime. And the letter that I typed out in the book is verbatim the actual letter that she wrote to Mr. Fernstrom, who found her goggles. He was an aerial cinematographer that would do work on the early movies with Howard Hughes. And anyway, it was interesting when I stumbled upon that. I thought, wow, what if they go missing again? So that kind of started the whole ball rolling.
Oh, that's interesting. So the house is almost, I would say, almost a character in this book. It's so important. Elizabeth, could you tell us about Amelia's house, and which is the same as museum? Just kind of tell us about that.
Well, once again, to reiterate, the house sits up on the bluffs of the Missouri River. It is a Gothic revival house. So that the style the house was built in was actually built by Amelia's grandfather, Judge Alfred Otis, in the early 1860s. He and his wife, Amelia, her maiden name was Harry's. Both of them were early settlers to Atchison. The house was expanded on several times, and Amelia was actually born in that house on July 24th, 1897. Interestingly, there were only 3 owners of the house, and then in 1984, the 99s, which are a group of women aviators, and Amelia was actually part of them. They purchased the house. So the house is actually owned by them. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. And let me check my notes here, but in 2001, the Amelia Earhart house became part of the Amelia Earhart Historic District. And so many of the houses in that neighborhood are within this district. The house is actually very, very lovely. It has many, unique architectural features. And it's significant, to be a National Register home as well.
Well, I know it's on my list of day trips to go to that museum. And
it's a lovely day trip. It's a lovely day trip to Atchison.
So can you tell me, does the museum decorate at Christmas, and do they have sleepovers like it is in the book?
Well, they do decorating. However, there's another home museum here in town that does extensive decorations. So the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum does not do as extensively as the other house. They do not have sleepovers. However, I think Kristin needs to contact the director of the museum and say, we need to do this in coordination with the book. I think that would be
fun.
Absolutely cool. And, make it available on scholarship for, children who could not, afford to do it. But I think, or do a contest. Wouldn't that be just absolutely tying in with the book?
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
The in a small spoiler, but in the story, the girls open the closet door in Amelia's old bedroom, childhood bedroom, and what they find in the closet is actually what I found when I went and opened the door. I don't really know if I was supposed to open the door, but I couldn't be there and not peek, and they let me go upstairs by myself. So I did. So I thought I had to work it in there because I was so shocked at what it wasn't what I was expecting. So I turned it into a plot device.
That's cool. So Kristin, what was the best part of writing the Amelia Six?
Definitely the research. I could get lost in research all day long. I checked out as many biographies on Amelia and her family as I could, and I loved it. And joining aviation communities online, I've learned so much just about flying and airplanes, and connecting with the Amelia Earhart girls in Londonderry, Ireland, which is where she landed on her historic flight in 1932. That has been a total joy. They've invited me once, COVID traveling is back to normal, to come see this actual spot where she landed in the farmer's field. And that's just been incredible. So, yeah.
Well, you're really speaking to librarians, because we love research.
Yeah.
And I do love it that back how you have other resources and other books. So I guess as a librarian, I'm always looking for those things.
Yes. Yeah.
So I did want to ask you about on when in the book, the character Millie, who is the main character, she says, you can be quiet and brave. So could you tell us about that quote and why you put that in there?
Sure.
Or the significance?
Yeah, what's funny about that, I had to, I'm glad you put the page number in, because I looked at it earlier today. I remember I had that line in the middle of a chapter, and my editor, rightly so, thought it was so strong that she wanted to end the chapter on it. So it became the last line of whichever chapter that is. It's towards the end of the book. But I've probably gotten more comments about that one line out of any other line in the whole story. And so I think she was right on to single that out. In the story, it's Robin is one of the more shy girls, is off to the side quietly recording what is happening. And I think what I'm trying to convey to children is you can quietly advocate for your friends at school, or a quiet act of kindness. It doesn't have to be this loud splash that's in the newspaper or in front of the whole student body. You can quietly, stick up for your friend by, telling a teacher something that you saw, or by picking up school books and helping someone up. There's countless ways that you can be quiet and brave without making a big fuss over it, I think is what I was getting at. We've been going through this even some this school year with my she's a junior high student now, just with online, not chats, and having to speak up when someone's not being kind. And I think that goes far. And it's not always an easy thing to do. No.
I do love the way the friendships develop in this book, and the way the girls interact. So I think that's really an important part of the book. So Elizabeth, talking some more about the city of Atchison, in what ways, besides the museum, does the city celebrate Amelia Earhart?
Well, traditionally, since 1997, the city has celebrated the third week in July, the Amelia Earhart Festival. And it has carnivals, carnival rides, ice cream social, cake, which are phenomenal. And there's also in conjunction with all of that, Amelia Earhart Fun Run, which is put on by the YMCA. And in the summertime, there is also a bike ride that is called the annual Amelia Earhart Century Bike Ride. And they do 34, 62, or 100-mile round trip from Atchison back to Atchison. But you get to see the hilly Kansas landscape if you're doing that. Many of the buildings here, structures, and there are other sites that commemorate Amelia Earhart. Interestingly, as I said, the first Amelia Earhart Festival started in 1997. And to aid with that, artist Stan Hurd, who does earthwork sculptures, did an earthwork of Amelia Earhart's face, having on her flight helmet, and it is out at Warnock Lake. Also, the post office is named after Amelia Earhart, as well as the bridge, which spans from the Kansas side to the Missouri side of the Missouri River. And recently, Atchison is boasting their new piece of Amelia Pride, which is the Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum, which actually has a replica of the Electra that she was piloting. It is one of the last remaining Electras around. And it was purchased by the Cray family, and so they made a wonderful museum out at the airport.
And it's named after her sister, correct? Is it Muriel?
Yes, Muriel. The plane is named Muriel, correct. Yeah. So those are just a few of the things that Amelia has touched. Her presence is still felt here, very, very much so.
So for anyone who wants to, well, I understand you also have haunted Atchison tours and things like that coming up.
Yeah, they're
also
not quite as prevalent as they were, a couple years ago, but they're still doing them. COVID has created some definite cancellations, and the Amelia Earhart Festival did not go off this year or the year before. So
is the museum open?
the museum is open. The museum is open right now, Tuesday through Saturday. And anyone who would be interested in going, I would suggest that they go to the website. It's ameliaearhartmuseum.org. And they also have a presence on Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. And the gift store, not only is the physical gift store within the museum, however, they have a great presence of gifts online as well through the ameliaearhartmuseum.org site.
Oh, and Holly just put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's a very, very user-friendly site, extremely easy to use. So I would suggest, that people get on and take a look. Nice little, tchotchkes and gifts, especially to go coincide with the book.
I took my own pictures when I was there, but I also had to go and refer. They have a little virtual tour. I think if it's still on their website, that right. I had to refer to quite often. But it's wonderful. And it's definitely worth a day trip.
Well, good. Well, before we get to our last question, I just wondered if there's anything either of you wanted to, maybe there's a question I didn't ask that you wish I had, or something you wanted to say more about? So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
I will say the ending that I have now was not the original ending that I turned in. I tend to overcomplicate, as you can see by having 6 characters to juggle. I tend to I like complicated plots and movies and books. And correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, but I believe Judge Otis was also a banker, right, at the Bank of Atchison.
Yes.
And so originally I had the girls, they found a safety deposit key that took them to the bank and Amelia had left something in a lockbox. And anyway, I thought, my editor suggested simplifying and keeping everything in the house, and there was a blizzard, and so I did. But I always thought that was interesting too, that Grandpa Otis was the banker, Atchison Savings Bank, and I don't know if it's in the same location where it was originally, but no, okay. But I just love learning about the whole family, and then and then some of my research, it came across that they did help enslaved people escape on the Underground Railroad, because they were right there along the river and the train tracks to get to the north. So it's not surprising that they were on the right side of history, just knowing what we know about how Amelia is so forward thinking and boundary breaking. That I just made me fall in love with the family even more.
Well, I know I learned a ton about Amelia and about Atchison reading this book, and even as an adult, I enjoyed it immensely.
Well, thank you.
So, well, we have one last question for you, Kristin. What advice do you have for young readers and maybe budding writers?
Read as much as you can. Pay attention to the world around you. Nothing is too small to notice that could be important. Write as much as you can. Write just for yourself and don't show it to anyone else. Have a journal or a notebook that you keep just to write your own stories in. Yeah, and keep thinking about the world around you. That's what I would do.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Eric right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was fascinating. There was a lot of things that I didn't know, and I do make that a day trip, like Cindy said, and get up there and visit the museum.
It could be wonderful.
Thank you.
Atchison exudes with history. I mean, Amelia is the pinnacle, but there is so much more to see and do. And it's just a fascinating place.
I have been to Atchison a couple times. I've driven through it a couple times, but I've only stopped in Eaton and stopped at the library, to be honest. So I need to make more of a point to explore the town. So, but I really appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Kristin, thank you so much. This was a delightful afternoon. I'm glad you could join us.
Oh, you guys were wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Perfect. And again, I wanted to plug the book and plug our program. Amelia Six as one of the notable books. As part of that program, we set up a grant that allowed for public libraries to carry all of the notable books in their libraries. And so we actually pay for them to purchase the book and make it available in their public library. So if anybody is out there is interested in the book and you don't have your hands on it, go to your local public library and look for it. They should have it there. And also we do work with the independent booksellers in Kansas. And so I know that they have available, most of them have the sticker on it ready to go. So just making a plug for that book, and also just to mention the Kansas Book Festival on September 18th. Look it up online and find some more information about it. I will say that a lot of the programs are being held outside this year. That's why we went to the Washburn campus to be able to spread it out. But anyway, Kristin, again, thank you so much. This was fascinating. Thank you, Cindy, for putting it together. And I really enjoyed myself. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And this will be archived on our website and also, I think, on Facebook, right, Holly?
It'll be on our website, and I think we'll have it on YouTube, and we'll probably share it on Facebook. But if for some reason you can't find it, just shoot us a message. You can find our email at kslib.info anytime.
Oh, thank you, guys. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Thank you.